The ANC is hoping to tackle the issue of migration in this coming weekend, at its national policy conference. The party says the country's migration laws are not aligned, making it vulnerable to abuse and corruption. Among the questions being asked is, why is the ANC only paying attention to this detail, at least insofar as the migration laws are concerned, only now? Well, for that and a whole lot more, let's bring in Dr. Motsoaledi, who's the chairperson of the party's subcommittee on migration, also, of course, the country's Home Affairs Minister. Dr. Motsoaledi, it's great to have you on the program. Thank you so much indeed for making time. My understanding is that the ANC is calling for one migration policy framework. Help us understand what the framework looks like now and in what ways it makes us vulnerable to things like corruption.
Well, good morning, Ayanda. Good morning to the listeners and the viewers. Well, in the policy document which we are presenting to conference, we are showing that ever since 1994, ANC branches by themselves have never set and discussed an overarching migration policy. We have got a lot of laws on migration, obviously, in Home Affairs, but there's no overarching policy coming from the ruling party, which was ever discussed by province as to exactly what the migration must look like. So for that reason, we have got a lot of gaps and a lot of incidences that are not good, which some of you might have known about. Like if you listen to the report presented to Parliament 3 weeks ago by a review committee on permits and visas, which was chaired by a former Director General in the President's office, you will realize exactly where the gaps lie.
Yeah. I guess part of the obvious questions that come up is why it is that this has never been an issue really that's been in front of the ANC at its policy conference. Is it a matter of the party just not getting around to it or for other reasons?
Well, look, let's look at the borders, for instance, because this also, the issue of migration also starts at the borders. It's not that it's new, it's only that it took time. 10 years ago, at least a decade ago, NICOC, the National Intelligence Coordinating Committee, the structure that coordinates all intelligence services of the country, military intelligence, crime intelligence, and state security intelligence, and all the other law enforcement that deal with intelligence. When they were doing their intelligence estimates, they actually flagged this issue around porous borders and the dangers it poses for the country. And they recommended that a border management authority be established. This was taken to government to enact an act to establish a border management authority act. And unfortunately, it took a decade for that act to go through Parliament. You are aware now, Ayanda, that it's on, and we've established the border management authority. And some 2 weeks or 3 weeks back, I went to Mosina to launch the first cohort of border guards who are being established under that border management authority. So it's not something that we can say is new. It's just developing.
Yes, no, you started our discussion by saying it hasn't necessarily been discussed within the ANC since 1994, unless I misunderstood that.
Yes, I said so. I'm talking about an overarching policy by the political party. The Border Management Authority Act, the Citizenship Act, the Refugee Act, the Immigration Act, they've all been enacted by government, by the Department of Home Affairs. But I'm saying all of them were done without an overarching political policy.
Yeah, and what I was trying to get to is why that hasn't happened until this point within the ANC.
Well, everything has got its time of happening within the ANC.
Right. Okay, that's the response. I imagine part of what you're hoping to also tighten on, Minister, is around, the fact that it's one thing to have great policies, but it doesn't really help if you have warm bodies within, for argument's sake, Home Affairs, who don't work towards implementing those policies themselves. I mean, part of what you tabled in Parliament about 3 weeks ago was around there were actually deliberate efforts within your department to even prevent you from conducting investigations to get to the bottom of why some permits are being issued. So take us through perhaps the thinking around taking care of corrupt officials policy-wise within Home Affairs as you mull over this migration policy.
Oh, Ayanda, we are. I'm sure you read almost every week. People who have been suspended, people who have been arrested, people who are going through DC. It's happening. Actually, the one you are quoting, whereby there was a feeble attempt by some people in the committee to write a petition to say we must stop investigating their errors, is because they were feeling the heat. We have just filled the position of the DDG counter-corruption. If you look at the whole government, there's no department that has got a whole branch. That means a unit headed by the DDG, whose work is counter-corruption, the corruption especially to deal with people inside the department. Now, because the unit was very active, that's why people were feeling the heat, were having a feeble attempt to try and stop it through a petition that it must stop investigating their errors. And that's why I put this review committee chaired by Dr. Lubisi, which actually unveiled that these things are not errors. They are deliberate actions to bring people here fraudulently and illegally, obviously for money. So we are definitely uprooting all those things, because we can't correct anything without uprooting this malfeasance.
It almost feels like you also can't really solve all the problems alone. I mean, part of the things you've noted is that there are also gaps in labor laws in this country, and that opens up employers to abuse in terms of them exploiting foreign nationals for argument's sake. Would there be a need for some kind of, for lack of a better term, collaboration between the Home Affairs Department and Labour Department to solve those kind of issues, which are still related to migration, if you follow what I mean?
Yes, we are already collaborating. But the point we are making, Ayanda, is that sometimes we collaborate when a problem has already existed. I'm sure you are aware that 2 years ago, the president launched IMC, Inter-Ministerial Committee on Migration, which is co-chaired by me as Minister of Home Affairs and Minister Nxesi as Minister of Employment and Labour. But what we are proposing here now is to do it even before problems occur. We are saying at the moment, the whole issue of immigration, of who comes into the country under what conditions, is regulated and controlled by Home Affairs. We are proposing that an immigration board be formed, which will consist of all departments that are impacted upon by the issue of migration. Like we mentioned, obviously the Department of Home Affairs, but the Department of Trade and Industry, Employment and Labour, Health, Small Business, Tourism, Police, South African Revenue Services, Education, both higher education and basic education, international relations, defense. And there we are also saying then there must also be labour, meaning trade unions, and also civil society, and also experts who are skilled in issues of forensic investigation, in negotiations, in regulatory and international law. Yeah.
What you've also pointed out is the system in its current form is not only open to abuse, but also contradictions. Can you tell us a bit more about the latter?
Oh, no. When I was mentioning contradictions, I was mentioning the fact that since democracy, there are 3 laws in the country which impact on immigration. It is the Citizenship Act passed in 1995. It is the Refugee Act passed in 1998. It is the Immigration Act passed in 2002. Now, I'm saying because there's no overarching policy that controls all of them. They were passed separately at different times. And we've discovered when we go to the courts of law that there are contradictions between them. For instance, we take somebody to court because they've breached the Immigration Act, only to be told in court that no, but the Refugee Act says something else, which opposes what you are saying. And so we start discovering these contradictions. And now, one of the recommendations we are making is that there must be a review of all this legislation, and we have checked internationally how it's done and discovered that many countries do not have 3 separate laws on citizenship, immigration, and refugee. They actually put them as one omnibus law with different chapters, but it is one act. And we are also recommending that that should happen in South Africa.
Fair enough. You know, even just going through the policy documents of the governing party over the past week or so, which I imagine many of my colleagues are doing, we've realized there's a lot of density to what the ANC needs to discuss. And I'm only raising this to speak to you in your capacity as an ANC NEC member, because already there are real fears that the party won't really have time to go through some of the substantive issues at the policy conference this coming weekend because of the many challenges that you're facing as an organization, not least of which those unpaid salaries from some workers. Is that something that keeps you up at night?
Of course, issues of policy, especially on the front of economy and labor, will keep anybody awake, anybody who is interested in the welfare of the country, especially if you are in power. It will keep you awake because you want solutions. But remember, that these documents were sent to branches. They were being discussed. Some of the provinces called general councils. Like on Monday, I spent the whole afternoon in Mpumalanga in their general council presenting this paper. I then even joined in their commissions to discuss it thoroughly. So people are not just coming to start from the beginning. They are not coming blank, in other words. They've been studying these documents, but we also have 3 days to discuss all these issues.
All right, Aaron Motsoaledi, thanks very much indeed for speaking to us. Dr. Motsoaledi is the chairperson of the ANC subcommittee on migration, also, of course, the country's Home Affairs Minister. Once again, thanks very much indeed.